All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for being here this afternoon. Yesterday, I submitted my nomination package. I felt really privileged to do that. It's my understanding that I was the first candidate to do so. That included gathering over 1,000 signatures from Albertans right across the province. It's been a great opportunity as I've traveled across the province to listen to Albertans, both conservative-minded Albertans and all Albertans, as they share with me their concerns, their perspectives, and as I'm able to give them my vision of the future of the province and the great opportunity this province has. Now, I want to turn to the main news of the day, and that is the Government of Alberta's 21-22 annual report was released today, and it revealed that we have a $3.9 billion surplus for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022, and that's certainly good news. We've worked hard over the past 3 years to bring financial responsibility, to steward taxpayer dollars well, and to bring Alberta's spending in line with other provinces. And we did this while increasing funding to education and to health, and we did this while successfully negotiating collective bargaining agreements with our nurses, public servants, and our teachers and healthcare workers, ensuring that frontline healthcare service, our education services didn't stop and were not disrupted. As Finance Minister, I was truly privileged to serve Albertans in the capacity as Finance Minister and to bring fiscal responsibility to the province of Alberta, putting the province on a strong fiscal path. Balanced budgets don't happen by accident. They don't balance themselves. It takes hard work and a commitment to sound fiscal principles. And over the last few years, we identified 3 fiscal anchors that ultimately informed our fiscal decisions and I believe contributed to the balanced budget and surplus that in fact was revealed today. Those fiscal anchors were number 1, we committed to keeping a strong balance sheet, keeping our net debt to GDP ratio below 30%. I'm very pleased today to announce that at the end of fiscal year March 31st, 2022, our net debt to GDP ratio is in fact 16.2%. So certainly we've maintained a very strong balance sheet in the province of Alberta. Secondly, and I think perhaps our most important fiscal anchor, was to align our spending, and that's on a per capita basis, with that of comparable provinces. For some of you, you'll remember the McKinnon panel report demonstrated that Alberta was an outlier in terms of its spending. We spent $10 billion more than comparator provinces, and that simply was not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for Albertans today and certainly not sustainable for Albertans in the future. And so I'm very pleased to say that in the current budget year, the year that we're in now, we're expecting that our per capita spend, our spending will come in line with other provinces, and that's critically important as we put this province on a very sustainable fiscal trajectory. Now, along with managing spending, we've also worked to position Alberta, our economy, to be most competitive, to be an economy that attracts investment, that results in economic growth and job creation, and even expanded fiscal capacity. And I'm so pleased to hear now from major economists, certainly our major banks, that Alberta is expected to lead the nation in economic growth both this year and next. You know, and just an example of what an expanding economy means and expanded fiscal capacity means, to demonstrate the benefit of that, I can say this, that we're expecting to collect more in corporate tax revenues in this province at an 8% rate than the previous government collected at 12%. That means that with a lower burden of taxation, we're actually collecting additional revenues. Why? Because the pie is growing larger, because we're expanding our economic and fiscal capacity, and that's really good news for Albertans again today and Albertans of the future. Our fiscal policies have resulted in Alberta's first credit upgrade in well over a decade, and again, that's very good news for Albertans today and Albertans in the future. And we were able to pay down $1.3 billion of debt this last year, and that means our debt levels are going in the right direction meaning going down. The Heritage Trust Fund is at its highest level for investable assets. It's at over $20 billion today, And again, that's good news for Albertans. As a United Conservative Party leader, and if I have the privilege to serve as the Premier of this province, I will continue to work to bolster Alberta's savings, and I'll continue to work to bring fiscal responsibility to this province. I'll continue to work to position this economy to be most competitive so that we see a province of economic growth, increasing opportunity and prosperity and opportunity for the next generation of Albertans. Going forward, it will be critical to position this province for competitiveness and economic growth and economic stability. It will be critical that we create a landscape and maintain an economic landscape of certainty and predictability if we want to operate as a province from a position of strength within this confederation. And if privileged to serve as the next leader of our party and the Premier of this great province, I will ensure that these values, the values of fiscal responsibility, economic growth, job creation, opportunity, and prosperity will continue to be the foundation of everything we do. So thank you for attending today. I'll be happy to answer a few questions.
Yeah, sure. So I know for many people, fiscal concerns clearly matter, but many would argue that they weren't what contributed to the downfall of Jason Kenney's leadership. I just wanted to ask straight up, if elected, would you immediately state all investigations, prosecutions, punishments against people under lockdown orders?
Well, look, we have a justice system, and we need to respect that as elected officials. I would certainly defer to the justice system. It's critical that we uphold and respect that process. That would be my response.
So you don't have any concern as far as the government's response, mass arrests of pastors, the small businesses being unfairly targeted? Do you have no concern over some of the management by the UCP and the government recently that extended far beyond just law enforcement, but the measures we saw implemented?
Look, absolutely appreciate that. It's been a very tough couple of years, and the government's response through the pandemic was far from perfect. Absolutely appreciate that. What I will commit to is a full, independent, third-party review of the government's response during the last 2 years of this pandemic. Albertans need to know where the government erred, where it got things right, and we need to know ultimately what happened, what worked, what didn't, to inform future governments.
And one more, if you don't mind. For folks right now facing ongoing persecution, maybe potentially even behind bars, we saw Tamara Litch again arrested. What in the sort of short term can be done to help those people?
Look, we need to absolutely defend the right for Albertans to legally and to protest in a law-abiding way. That's a fundamental right and privilege in a democracy. That must be defended. Now, again, in terms of actions right now that are before the courts, it would be irresponsible for politicians to intervene. But in terms of defending the right to peacefully and protest in a law-abiding way, that's critical.
Thank you.
On budget, I recognize there are a lot of factors which go into a surplus or deficit, but I think it's fair to say that the biggest factor this time was record resource revenues. And that's something that's been variable for as long as we can remember in Alberta. So I'm wondering what your approach would be to stabilize that, to get us off this roller coaster.
Sure. Well, a few things. Ultimately, bringing sustainability, fiscal responsibility to the province is critical. It's critical for the next generation. And job number one was to get our spending in line. That was job number one. And I'm really pleased to say that in this fiscal year, we will have delivered, certainly as compared to other provinces. The other important part about that is expanding our economic and fiscal capacity, and I believe that's happening in this province. We're seeing that reflected in increased corporate tax revenues, even personal tax revenues, and of course the third part of the piece that we're seeing in terms of balancing, recording a surplus, is strength in energy prices this year, which is very welcome. As finance minister, I committed to appointing a panel to review our revenues, to consider the appropriateness and efficiency of our tax system and revenue structure. I believe that will be an important step in putting this province on a very sustainable fiscal trajectory.
Lots of discussion at today's Alberta Relaunch conference in Calgary about decarbonization and net zero economy. What do you view the government's role as in helping facilitate that transition?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, Alberta's energy industry is a world leader in emissions reduction, in producing and exporting energy that is most responsible. We will continue to work with the industry to ensure that we have the most responsible industry globally. We'll continue to work with the industry as they move towards producing with fewer and fewer and lower emissions. Many, as you know, many of our major companies in this province have net zero aspirations by 2050, and again, we'll work with that sector to ensure that their aspirations can be accommodated.
Yeah, on your campaign and on traction so far, we haven't seen a lot of polling out, but the Angus Reid polling puts you in third behind Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, with about 10 percentage points separating you. Why do you think that your message so far hasn't resonated quite as well as theirs, and what do you plan to do to get this message to more Albertans?
Sure. Well, look, it's early days in the campaign, and I'm not paying attention to polls. I'm paying attention to Albertans. I'm getting around and meeting Albertans in town halls, in their communities. I'm listening to their perspectives, and ultimately that's what's important to me today. Because as I travel around, I find many Albertans feel that they haven't had a voice in these last 2 years, and it's critical that as leadership or as leadership hopefuls that we give Albertans a voice. That's job number one for me.
Thanks, everybody.